Hey guys, I'm going to be getting into one of my all-time favorite Coen brother films, Barton Fink. This is increasingly, along with Inside Llewyn Davis, perhaps the most personal film that the Coen brothers made. Like Llewyn Davis, like the most fleshed out, but I think Barton Fink and all the characters around this just kind of portray just the ultimate exploration of dark anxiety that reminds me a lot of David Lynch's stuff, particularly Eraserhead and Blue Velvet, because there's just a lot of atmosphere. And I saw this film before any David Lynch films, actually, and I love this film instantly. I recall I was 16 years old. I had a double feature with this and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I saw that one first. The Ultimate Film Agreed. And I think Barton Fink really washed over me because I think it took me a few viewings to grasp just how much of a pretentious like Barton Fink is kind of like a pretentious douche because he's very self-absorbed the whole time. And I think it really does represent a lot of young creative types, especially in the film industry. Because I mean, it's because you really are in a certain kind of hell, and when you're in hell, it's like you're kind of just living to get out of life. So it does make you kind of stubborn, one noted, you could say. And a lot of that is living with it. But at the same time, this is like the darkest end of all that because, again, it's just ultimately just a deep exploration, very layered film of just kind of what it is to be a writer block hell. It's like Barton Fink's been a screenwriter for plays. And then he gets called over to make a B film. Usually I think Barton Fink's is almost like too high state of the art for like just the world around him. So he's just like kind of has a hard time relating to anybody. Like he's kind of going on. And that's what makes him kind of pretentious. He's always on about the common man and just trying to relate to an everyman. Where it's like, okay, well, maybe he didn't ever sit down and recognize what an everyman he is. Also, that can be the flaw. A lot of people, and I've seen that in myself throughout my first one. I'm actually kind of out to fix that for my second film, which will be way more of a mystery film. It'll be different. I'm a darker, yeah. And anyway, yeah, this is just a really unpredictable in nature to film the entire way through. That's what really makes this shine so much. Like the entire way through, it's always unpredictable. It's always very just intriguing to see what it is to be like a tormented. It's like the ultimate study of a tormented artist and kind of what he goes through. And a lot of this does relate a lot to how I think a lot of the feelings I've gone through for making the first film here, Fallacy. It's like a lot of this does kind of feel just dark and weird, although ultimately you overcome it. It's like that balance of light and dark you kind of just hone in on, and yeah, figure out where to evolve all that from there. There's very great trouble here. Like again, it reminds me a lot of how like this is I think the Coen brothers are good at making characters where you feel bad for them, but they also can be irritating too. So it's like you kind of understand why they're loners. And Barton Fink is kind of a little loner because he is kind of like a one-noted sort of guy. He's on to his thing only. If you kind of talk about things that are outside of what he resonates with, what he's trying to do, then he's pretty uninterested. Yeah, I can relate to that. Like I think I've come off like that to quite a few people, and that's something I kind of want to shift, in perspective here after I make this first film. Just always kind of figure out how to be more open. Like I look up to director David Lynch as the best kind of modern artist. And I know it's off the. This is very influenced by David Lynch. So I think it's warranted enough to I think mention his name a little bit on this when talking about Barton Fink. But I think that's part of what makes this film so perfect. It's just it's a deeply layered film about what all this feels like. And the more you watch it, just the more I pick up on it. It always feels like it never runs out of momentum to just kind of take in more and more details. I don't know, Barton's a pretty layered character. And kind of, I like to just really increasingly look at how he observes the common man and recognize, okay, a lot of flaw maybe in a lot of, people in general, how you look at that condescending outlook. You don't know you're being condescending, but it's like, ouch, okay, like, you're really up your head. You're not really thinking much of anyone else around you. So, and making true art can kind of make a pretentious bastard out of a person in a way. It's always there. And that's always been the ultimate guide for me. It's like how to kind of hone in on that, but not actually be that towards others, but be a pretentious asshole towards Mother Nature, rather. I realize how it's possible. I think all these films kind of growing up on these films, I'm thankful for films like this because I think I grew up, again, literally not understanding what made him unlikable. But as I got older, I see it more and more. It's like, okay, he's not likable. I wouldn't want to be around this guy. I don't really want to be around anyone in this film, honestly. Everyone's pretty bad in this film, actually. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? I don't think there is one good character in this film. At least I could think of. There's always a two-face, and you don't really see exactly what goes on. There's a lot of great metaphors of heaven and hell in a lot of ways, and yeah, just what it is to be forced into a story because I think this is like what hell is to a lot of creatives. It's just like being forced into a story that you don't really understand fully, and it's like, how do I execute that? I mean, and I think this would be a lot because this was set in like the early 1940s, so this was a lot harder, I think, to make a big film back then than now. Because now there's just always resources of all these great filmmaking boom has happened. All of these directors came and revolutionized it so hard that it's pretty easy to have a lot of masters to study now. Back then there weren't so many, so this would be another level of difficult. So yeah, that's really something else. I mean, I love John Goodman in this film. I mean, he is very much like the ultimate walking force of like a light and dark sort of guy. I will also say, speaking of him, if you ever watch this, and pick up the DVD. So I don't think it's a Blu-ray copy. This is an underrated film. I believe it's quite easily deserves the Criterion treatment. But yeah, don't look at the menu. Just make sure you close your eyes and just click play on the remote, because it actually spoils part of the ending. That stinks, because it's very surprising. I feel like otherwise. Anyway, yeah, I mean, this is like a film of insanity. It does kind of continue a lot of what David Lynch is doing in Eraserhead. It reminds me of that atmosphere more than anything, but a little bit more of like a cohesive, grounded plot to it. It's not much of a plot really, but it is kind of like a paranoid apartment thriller. It's almost like the Eraserhead. That's what Eraserhead kind of feels like. Taking from some stuff like Repulsion or Rosemary's Baby too. Barton Fink just feels like what it is to kind of be like in an introverted hell, where you feel like you're just confused with what to say, and it makes you kind of too out of touch with the world for your own good. And John Goodman kind of comes here, and yeah, I mean, this is just really what it is to just kind of just study it again. And there's always all the symbolism of just Barton Fink just staring at this painting of like he needs to kind of tune in with nature more. None of this film he's tuning in. He's just always in a stressed out and anxious mood, getting himself into these situations. Meeting this like woman who can help him, but then it's like, oh, she's been basically helping out this douchebag writer, and he's like the worst kind of asshole, very animated kind of asshole. There's just nothing about this has been done before. It does feel extremely original. And I love this even more. Like Miller's Crossing laid out this perfect, reinvention of the crime, genre. But I think Barton Fink perhaps evolves that into something even more original. It's just like its own kind of genre. It feels like kind of dreamy, a dark, dreamy mood here. It reminds me a lot of David Lynch, Roman Polanski more than anything else. Those are the two directors this film makes me think of. It's just unpredictable, kind of like you're in a hell within your apartment. And I feels like, there's just something really amazing about all this. And it's really, really quite a dark comedy too. There's some pretty hilarious moments, but it's also just ultimately very thought-provoking on the nature of madness and what drives people mad ultimately. I mean, it's just, this is really a great, one of the best studies ever on madness. It's up there in isolation. Madness of isolation, much like The Shining. So it also reminds me of like a lot of Stanley Kubrick influence going into this, most definitely too. But the Coens have a very different eye. All these things. There's a lot more of a talkie, and it's not really. It's very rich in atmosphere, but I feel like there's also a lot more motion. So that's what the Coen brothers ultimately feel like. It's like a more talkie Kubrick. I feel like more fast paced and hippity hoppy. But that's Barton Fink. I recommend this one to anybody. I don't see what's not to love here. I mean, it's kind of hilarious how of all places The Simpsons is what introduced me to that. I got to talk about The Simpsons eventually. I realized, okay, they did change my life in a way I've got to catch up to how to talk about that one. But yeah, Barton Fink is like just perfect filmmaking. I mean, from start to finish, absolutely perfect. That's all. Yeah, I mean, you just got to check this one out. This is quite an unpredictable ride the whole way through. It's not a moment's wasted.